Mike. All right. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon. I think that days are messed up a little bit this week with the holiday, but I do believe it's Wednesday. We appreciate you being here. We've got a great webinar planned today and we will get to that in just a moment. You have joined a webinar series co-hosted by Rural Partners and University of Illinois Extension. Rural Partners very much appreciates Extension working with us on this, and we try to offer different webinars of different topics that are of interest to folks in rural areas. So today we're going to talk about ARPA investments in various counties around the state. We're going to highlight 4 of those. Just a few housekeeping items. If you weren't registered for today's webinar, but you'd like to get follow-up emails, including a link to the recording of the webinar, please put your email address in the chat box so the extension can pull that. Nancy is great about sending a follow-up email, usually the same day or maybe the next, with a link to the recording. Don't think we have PowerPoint slides today. If we do, those will be in there as well. If you have questions, please enter those in the chat and we will get to those probably throughout the webinar. We'll have, we have a few questions to get us started. And then as you enter questions, we'll be asking those of our panelists as well. I think we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. If anyone from Extension notes that I left anything out, please let me know and we'll cover it. So I'm going to introduce just briefly our panelists and then we will get started. So first we have Jackson County represented in Southern Illinois. We have Brian Chapman, who's the Jackson County Broadband Coordinator. We also have Fulton County represented. Cole McDaniel is the Director of Spoon River Partnership for Economic Development. He's also co-owner or co-principal, I'm not sure exactly what, of Hometown Consulting. I wanted to mention that. Representing McLean County, we have Chad Walden, who's the Village of Arrowsmith Mayor. And then representing McHenry County, we have Mike Buehler, who's the McHenry County Board Chair. So we really wanted to focus on 4 counties around the state. So we've got representation from northern, central, western, southern, and we're going to talk about how these 4 counties spent some of their ARPA funds. We're not going to get into every bit that was spent and all the different programs they supported, but each of them have a very unique program that they supported and how they spent ARPA funds that they thought was very meaningful for their community. And I think each county went about it a little bit differently. So we're going to talk about that. I will try not to jump in with Cole, but I also serve on the Fulton County Board. So the process was interesting, and I'm sure each county went through the interesting process that we did of trying to figure out where those funds can be best used to serve your communities. So I think we will go ahead and get started. So did I miss any in your introductions? Does anybody need to correct me or add to how I introduced you? Are we good there? Perfect. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to ask each panelist to take a few minutes to provide their overall allotment of ARPA funds that the county received and the process they use to determine how best to allocate funds. We're going to start with you, Brian.
Happy to go. Thank you, Laura. It's absolutely a delight to be here and to share with all of you how the Jackson County Board went about investing their ARPA funds. So I think it's important for us to say right off the bat, Jackson County has a professional county administrator. And so as a former faculty member of the SIU Masters of Public Administration program, I had to put a plug in for having and hiring a professional administrator at the county level. So with that, our county administrator recommended to the county board that they create an ARPA fund subcommittee. So the first thing that the county did was it created a committee to take a look at and to review how to spend these ARPA funds. The Jackson County received just around $11 million. And so they opened up hearings from non-for-profits, villages and towns and elected officials. They presented to the county board and to the subcommittee on how they would invest those monies and their needs. And it became quite clear for the county board early on that they wanted to take a holistic approach. They wanted to invest funds that would benefit the entire county and not just small populations of the county. And so with that, after listening to a series of hearings, they kept a running total of the amount of money being requested. And again, Jackson County received about $11 million, and it didn't take long, and we had over $40 million in requests. And so the county board had quite a challenge on how to go about and addressing some of these needs. And with that, they came up really in 4 primary areas that they invested. Number one being broadband. Recognizing that if we could drive broadband into the rural areas of the county, that it will spur economic investment. It will assist with the retention of residents and attract new residents, we think, to the county, because as COVID exposed, we are now working from home, so you can enjoy living in Jackson County with all its natural resources and beauty and earn a nice paycheck. And so broadband became the primary investment with $5 million. Second, and thanks to our leadership of our county sheriff, the county board agreed to fund a medical segregation unit to build onto the county jail. I'm sure, like most of the counties in Illinois, you are seeing issues with mental health, and it's important to give some of these folks separate holding facilities. So that was the second priority. Third, the county board agreed to use some of the dollars towards salaries, and in particular, they agreed to hire a resource coordinator, which is a grant writer / administrator, to help these small villages and townships apply for grants, because as we all know, we are seeing record grants right now. We may not ever see this again in my lifetime. We have millions of dollars coming in, and as you all know, over $1 billion for broadband into the state. So to hire a resource coordinator. And then fourthly, they heavily invested in new election technology for the county. Laura?
Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
All right, Cole, would you like to talk about Fulton County?
Yeah, absolutely. So Fulton County received $6.7 million. I'll be speaking today about how a little over 800,000 of that was allocated for a small business grant program that we introduced in September of 2021 and gained approval from the county board in October of 2021. And really, to get that process was done for us post-pandemic, and the state and federal programs that were available to small business owners, and lots of different programs out there, whether that be the business interruption grant or downstate small business stabilization. There were a lot of dollars out there, but what we found out pretty quickly is there's also a lot of businesses that were ineligible for one reason or another, or it was a technicality, or they had opened their business not in the time frame to be eligible, and we knew there were some gaps to fill. So we were able to help 63 small businesses and disperse about $800,000 in funding in a 2-month time span with those ARPA dollars. I know that some of it has been allocated towards the county highway department, which is a major concern for the county, as far as we're the 10th largest county by land mass, but have a population of 34,000. So our budgets can be tight when it comes to maintaining roads, and we know how important infrastructure can be for economic development too. So I think that was a good use of the funds, and a lot of this has gone back through the county board as far as making the decisions on the rest of that funding. Laura can probably speak to some of that others if there's questions on that, but I'll be talking directly about the grant program today.
Thanks, Cole. Chad?
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach because I'm going to talk about how the rural communities in McLean County received ARPA funds, and then we all received smaller amounts, obviously, because it's based on your community size. So the village of Arrowsmith received $39,000. We're a very small community in eastern McLean County. We only have about 300 residents. $39,000 doesn't do a whole lot nowadays, as we all know. In our case, though, McLean County received $33 million. And many of the small rural communities, there's actually 20 of us, 22 towns, rural towns within McLean County, 20 of us are rural communities. I think the most anyone received was maybe like 135,000. That may have been like a Lexington, one of our larger communities. But all in all, it still wasn't enough for anyone to really complete a project. I had been made aware that Champaign County was talking about distributing their funds to some of the rural communities to help them with some of those projects that were larger, broadband, water, drainage, things like that. And so I took that back to the Mayor's Association. We have a McLean County Mayor's Association, which each of the mayors from each of the towns is a member of. and we meet about 4 times a year to kind of just have roundtable conversations and to talk about matters such as the ARPA funds. So we met and put together a kind of a presentation to take to our county board, Chairman John McIntyre and Cassie Taylor, who's our county administrator, to see if they might be willing to share some of their $33 million with the rural communities to help us with some of our larger projects. Many of us were struggling not with broadband, like you in Jackson County, Brian, but with really our water. Just water infrastructure is old and degrading. Those projects are in some cases millions of dollars for a small community. In our situation, we had a water tower which was built in 1954. Basically needed to be stripped down inside and outside, and that was the estimates came in at $360,000. So we put together a recommendation and took that to the county chairman, and then we're asked to put together a little bio on each one of our projects for each community that was going to request funding. So each town put together a 1-page on what project you would utilize those funds for. Ours happened to be, like I said, 360,000. One, I think the largest one was 1.75 million for a town that water tower was literally had been leaking for 2 years, leaking on the ground. So when we took that to the county board, the first went to the executive committee for their review, and we asked for 4 million initially. That's what everything kind of added up to. But to our surprise, they all agreed and gave us 5 million to allow for some other communities who may not have been involved right up front. So at the end, I believe there were 11 communities who shared that $5 million. And 8 of those were on water, and then a few of those others were for some drainage issues, but pretty much all were. That's what the topics that they used them for. And once it went to the McLean County Board, once again, we got a unanimous approval for those $5 million funds to be distributed through the communities. So it was kind of a lifesaver for a lot of the smaller communities, because those projects we just were not going to be able to fund those. Laura?
Thanks, Chad. And Mike?
Thank you for having us today. It's a pleasure to be here. Just tell you a little bit about McHenry County. We are the 6th largest county in Illinois. We've got a population of just over 310,000 residents. By land mass, we're probably 50% suburban, and the other 50% to the western half of the county is heavy agriculture. So we have a quite diverse county here. We received $59.8 million in ARPA funding to help our government and community rebound from the pandemic. And we're fortunate here in McHenry County due to strong fiscal leadership. We're one of 3 counties that can boast to be debt-free in the state, and we're in a strong financial position. So our county government didn't need the $59.8 million to rebound from the pandemic. And immediately my board and I directed staff to develop a program to get half of our ARPA dollars, nearly $30 million, directly into the community. We created what we call the Advanced McHenry County Program, a grant program that would allow groups and other local governments to apply for a portion of the $30 million we set aside for the community. We hired an outside consultant to facilitate these grants and had a rubric type system where the grant applicants would have to fill out applications. And we really wanted to make sure that the dollars spent were sustainable going forward, that they wouldn't end and the benefits wouldn't end once the money ran out. So that was one of the overriding criteria for acceptance for a grant, that these programs would continue. Our Advanced McHenry County grants approved to date by the county board total almost $25.3 million in funding, which has been invested directly into infrastructure capital projects such as sewer and water for some of our smaller communities. We are experiencing growth here in the county, so sewer and water projects will allow us to continue to grow. And 50 to 100 years down the road, we're hoping that these sewer and water systems are still going to be in place. So we think that's a pretty good bang for our buck. We've also invested in workforce development and jobs programs, nonprofit agencies, affordable housing for our aging population, and our local governments. Just an example would probably be quite a few ambulances and specialized medical equipment for public safety purposes. And earlier this year, the Department of the Treasury actually singled us out, our program, as an initiative as an example of how local governments are putting federal COVID relief funding to good use in their communities. Of particular interest to me was our manufacturing community in McHenry County. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we lost approximately 750 or 650 small businesses in the county, so we want to be able to rebound. And shortly after we received word on our ARPA allocation, I brought together a group of manufacturing executives to solicit their input on what kind of investments we could make in the business community. And they said, don't just put out fires, please make investments that will have a lasting impact. And I think we've done this for our manufacturing sector. 3 of our first awards were allocated to help the manufacturing sector and the benefits of which we hope to see for many years, if not decades to come. First, we awarded nearly $1.4 million to the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center. This award will provide technical assistance and training solutions to help McHenry County manufacturers rebound from the pandemic, enabling them to reinvent to become more globally competitive and become more resilient to future economic and societal shocks. And secondly, we awarded nearly $1.7 million to McHenry County College to help the college build a state-of-the-art educational and training program for the college's new Foglia Center for Advanced Technology. And this award will support more than half of the equipment costs for the new center, such as CNC machines, lathes, welding and cutting equipment. And we believe that this will help our manufacturers in the county greatly. And they're going to house numerous manufacturing and technology related programs. And finally, our last award to help the manufacturing is probably my favorite. McHenry County College and several of our leading manufacturers came together to create what we call the Manufacturing Pathways Consortium. The county was able to award nearly $720,000 to create a summer internship program to provide over 100 students the opportunity to participate in a 10-week paid internship program to expose them to local manufacturing career opportunities. The consortium is composed of manufacturers, educators, and community partners working together to select a talent pipeline of skilled manufacturing employees. The students earned $15 an hour while working 5 weeks at one manufacturer, then rotate to another manufacturer for a second 5-week experience. The public-private partnership was launched in the summer of 2022, and we're about to kick off our second summer of internships and have funding available to support the program in 2024 as well. While we initially expected 100 students to participate, we were pleased to exceed our goal. Ultimately, over 120 students went through the program last year, and we're exposing a lot of bright, capable young adults to high-paying jobs that they can move into right out of high school and assist our manufacturing community's need for labor. It's a real win-win, I think, and grants went to local high school districts to support vocational training in areas like manufacturing, culinary arts, and nursing programs, some of which are dual credit with McHenry County College. And this is a huge win, not only for our young adults entering the workforce, but also for the manufacturing, our healthcare providers and restaurant industries who were severely impacted by the pandemic. Ultimately, it benefits all of the residents in our community. And to date, the Advanced McHenry County program has directly allocated over $3.8 million to help our manufacturing community. And the entire program has been very rewarding, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished to date.
Thanks, Mike. I think some of us are jealous at that price tag that you started out with, and we wish we could have had more of that.
But we didn't receive any CARES funding earlier on. We didn't qualify for that. And some of our neighbors who have much larger populations than we do, we're a little bit jealous of them as well.
All right, Brian, back to you. So can you talk to us more about the specifics about the broadband, some of the funds that were spent on broadband?
I can. I'm happy to do so. I'm going to go to screen share if it's all right, Laura. And I think I've got my presentation up and going. And can everyone see that?
You're good.
Okay, very good. But now I've got to get to the start of it if I can, but let's see if I can find it. I don't see it, so I really hate to go in this. But anyway, we'll do it. We'll do it this way just because I can't seem to find it. All right, well, I want to point out for everyone, though, that for Jackson County, we have a series of partners from the Illinois Extension to the Illinois Department of Economic Opportunity to the Benton Institute to Southern Illinois University, the medical school, and others. And so this is part of a presentation that I do throughout the county, connecting Jackson County for yesterday's future. The whole point here is that when it comes to broadband and connectivity, I feel like Jackson County is behind the times. Let's go on to our next slide. Let me see if I can't reduce all of you because you are taking up, there we are. So welcome to my grandson. So how does Jackson County become more attractive to Ash and Jay to work, live, and play? Well, we believe the solution is with a click of a mouse, right? With a click of a mouse, broadband opens a million doors of opportunity. And without it, they remain locked forever. And just a side note for Jackson County, when COVID hit, when we still had school districts that had to physically photocopy homework assignments and send them through the mail. And so it became quite clear early on that we had to do something to get Jackson County connected. And I'm very pleased that the county board has made this a priority. So shout out to the county board. And so with that, then, the county board decided to set aside $5 million. And we think we were one of the first counties to do that, to put towards matching grants to build out the county. And for us, we have an estimate of anywhere from $75 to $85 million to build the county out in fiber. And then with that, the county board made application for an Accelerate grant. And I need to put a shout out also for the Illinois Office of Broadband. They are doing just a phenomenal job of educating and guiding these grant dollars to make the biggest impact for Illinois to get broadband out to everyone. And so we made application for an Accelerate grant, which was a 14-week training program that our Connect Jackson County committee went through to help us put together a strategic plan to build out the county. Progress to date, I'm just going to go through a few things. So we received the grant, we recruited an Accelerate grant team, and if I have team members on today, thank you so much. You are making a difference for Jackson County. And I can't reiterate and emphasize strongly enough how important it is to put together a team of individuals who are dedicated to getting broadband out into your community. And they need to be leaders from your community, business owners and CEOs from the county, as well as be sure to engage your school districts, please. We've made a lot of progress to date. I'll go through just a few things. We've interviewed current and potential broadband providers, and if I have any broadband providers on the call today, thank you. We've been so fortunate that we've had a dynamic response from providers. They're interested in partnering with the county board, and they want to see broadband delivered to all of the unserved and underserved areas of the county. We've drafted partnership recommendations for the county board. We've invited 3 fiber providers to present to the county board. And we feel that the fiber is an infrastructure investment. So we're emphasizing that, but we also recognize that some areas of our county, it's going to be quite a few years before fiber will make its way through. And so we're also looking to partner with a wireless provider. And we're currently reviewing draft public and private partnership agreements. And we're trying to identify language that will protect the county with this $5 million investment. These are my county Connect Jackson County team members, and I won't go through all of them, but if you're on today, again, I say thank you for all your effort. So here's a map, and you can, for every county in Illinois, please go to the Illinois Office of Broadband, and you can find your county map, and you can find their data on those that are considered underserved and unserved. And so here, underserved is having a download speed of less than 100 megabytes per second and an upload speed of less than 20 megabytes per second. So for Jackson County, everything in the pink is considered underserved, and it is eligible for grant funding. Remember that $1 billion I talked about that's coming? That pink area qualifies. So I'm encouraging all of you, please go visit the Illinois Office of Broadband. They have an interactive map. They've worked very hard on getting this up to date, working with all the providers throughout the state. And, I've done some limited work with Boulder County in Colorado and some limited work with LA County in California. And I have to say, in Jackson, Illinois is at the top of its game when it comes to our mapping, our data collection, and putting a plan together to get these funds out to the rural areas of Illinois. We launched a countywide survey, and I would also encourage the counties to think about launching your own survey because you'll find some very interesting things. So for instance, for us, we found that 67% of our respondents have to resort to their cell phone whenever they're trying to do something with the internet, right? That their connectivity at their house is that poor that they have to use their cell phone and try to get it done. For me and my wife, so you know what today's standard is, it's 100 megabytes download. At my house, I average around 9 megabytes download. And so when I'm trying to teach a class for SIU or I'm engaging in Zoom calls, it's very difficult for me to do that. We've learned a lot over the last year in Jackson County. And I'll just go through a few things. You need to know that the broadband issues that we have in each county, they are solvable. And here's where I think government does a great job of stepping in. Currently, where we see broadband, it's in the profitable areas for the providers, and that's the way it should be. That's a free market working. Where we don't see high-speed internet is because it's not profitable. And here's where government can step in and put that infrastructure in to make it profitable for those private providers. So we've also learned, that fiber is an infrastructure, and just like water and sewer, this fiber infrastructure will be around for 50, maybe even 100 years. And so the county board feels like this is a very good investment. The other thing is that we've learned that you can't create a plan that one size fits all. So for us, we do believe it's going to take a combination of both fiber and wireless to make it work. Also for us at the county board level, they felt like they wanted to take those dollars at $5 million, and we want to try to leverage that into an $80 million build, right? And we feel like that's a very good investment. So I would encourage you to use your ARPA funds for grant making, right? For those matching grants. And then lastly, a lesson learned is we need to all do a better job of educating our policymakers on the need that's out there. If you want to drive economic development for your counties, I would strongly urge you to invest in broadband. It is weekly that I have real estate agents calling me, wanting to know when they're going to get broadband to this particular home or this particular farm because they have a buyer, but the buyer is not interested because there's not high-speed internet. And we see a lot of buyers coming to us in downstate Illinois, in Jackson County, from the Chicago metro area. They're wanting to move into a more rural area where we have a lot of great state and national forest, and so a lot of resources, natural resources. They want to get out of the city, but they have to be connected because they still need to work. And then, so we're working on a proposal for the county board. You can kind of see some of the things we're working on. Early on, the county board, when we interviewed the county board members, became quite clear that they did not want to stand up a public broadband company, if you will, but they wanted to partner with private providers to make it work for them. All right, and that they wanted to focus on the unserved and underserved areas of the county, which is primarily all the rural areas of the county. So if you live in Carbondale, Illinois, or Murfreesboro, Illinois, you are overserved. You have 2 and 3 and 4 providers to choose from, and you have high speed. But when you get out to the rural areas, that's not the case. And so, for us, we are currently working on selecting partners and for partnership. I have to say, for the 3 fiber providers that we're entertaining, we are so fortunate that they are at the table working with us. As a Connect Jackson County group, we're comfortable with all 3. And we're also then working to help put together a formalized partnership agreement. And here's where you get into the legal language. And this is where, like us in Jackson County, perhaps your state's attorney's office isn't as familiar with public-private partnerships, so you may need to seek outside counsel. And then we're also looking to how we can take our $5 million and partner with these providers for joint grant applications. And we're excited to get that process started because in the state of Illinois, the Connect Illinois grants are up and running. There are challenges, and just so you know, public-private partnerships are not easy and they're not fast. And so it does take a while. Provider investments in the rural areas, they really have been slim to date, but we believe that with public investments, it's going to turn around. Securing of easements for property rights, right, to lay that fiber is cumbersome in Illinois, and it takes a long time. Preparing joint grant applications also takes a lot of resources. Not all the counties have a grant writer or an administrator. Some of the providers, though, are very talented and experienced at grant writing. So we're fortunate to have that type of a partnership with our providers who are remaining for our consideration. But once you get the grant, then you have to administer the grant. And that also, as you all know, takes a lot of effort. And that's a challenge, especially for some of the rural areas and rural counties here in Illinois. Laura, that was a very quick review. Sorry about that. Here we are. And I'm open for any questions that we may have.
I think, Brian, we'll keep going through the rest of the panelists and
Yeah,
then give folks a chance to put questions in the chat box. We already have a really good one once we get through these initial conversations. So thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome. I'm trying to get to the stop share and it won't let me.
I can.
There we go. There it is.
Having a mother that lives in Jackson County in the country, I can relate to not having good access to broadband services when I'm there.
Sure.
All right. Cole, would you like to talk about Fulton County's program?
Yeah, absolutely. And much different than Brian, maybe similar to Chad, as Chad was saying earlier. I think it's, a lot of these projects are still going on and there's a lot of decisions that can still be made for investments. What I'm going to talk about is something that we did invest our ARPA dollars in and could still be done. I would probably have a little bit different lens on it now, moving a little farther away from the pandemic and some of the things that the other programs that have come out since then. So take what I'm going to tell you with this, and I would gear it 100% towards entrepreneurs and small businesses looking to open in our areas and looking to support those versus maybe some of the recovery. But what was important for us, and we found out pretty quickly, is there were a lot of programs available, and I'll share a presentation and kind of go through some of that here in just a second, but there were a lot of programs available. There were a lot of businesses that were eligible and received funding, and it was a savior for them in our rural county for those businesses to be able to access the funding from the state and federal agencies. But we quickly found out there were a lot that weren't, and not just because they didn't meet the eligibility requirements, but believe it or not, there's still some businesses and some 30-year businesses that don't have a scanner, that don't have a way to sign and send this application back in. And we found that more and more, and we're pretty boots on the ground from the Spoon River Partnership with business owners and trying to be that conduit between the county and the municipalities and the business sector, because we were slowly finding that there were some of our businesses that if we didn't put out the fire, probably weren't going to be around, and with all the funding that was out there and all the programs that were out there, I'm happy to say that, I think the business interruption grant initially had $300 million and $250 million in it, and that had been refunded several times. And we'd received some of that funding in Fulton County. But I'm happy to say that the program that the county put together, that I'll show you some more documents on here in a moment, and that they approved, was the most impactful for Fulton County from a recovery standpoint, from a total dollars and total number of businesses that were impacted. So I'm going to share, I'm going to share with you all a little recap I gave to the county board post-program. If I can find it here, sorry. Okay. Sorry, bear with me. My screen down here is a little small. I actually don't see the share option here, Laura.
It's in green in the middle of below the pictures. It shows share screen. It's between chat and record. I don't know if you see the same thing I do.
I do. Thank you.
I can assure everyone it was a great presentation.
We'll get there. Hold on. Okay. Let's try it like this.
Yep.
Is everybody able to see that now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'll talk to this. a little bit. So this was presented in May of 2022. So like I was saying, a little different from Brian's, as Brian and other communities are still working on a lot of their projects and still seeking other funding to match this. And I think that's exciting. I'm happy that this program was quick and to the point, and we were able to turn it around quickly. That was an important part of this, being an emergency relief grant for businesses. So I want to first go through some of the breakdown of the impacts. I think that's important. We knew there were businesses, you'll see in some of these communities that do have 300 people. They may have one business. So that is their tax base from a business standpoint sometimes. So jumping into it, we created this program to fill the gaps, like I said, from the state and federal programs. So of the total funding of $757,500, we had 80 applicants. 63 grants were awarded to small businesses throughout the county. And interestingly enough, we did have 3 fraudulent applications. So if you want to recommend, create, and administer a grant program that you recommend to the county and they approve it, make sure that you're staying in tune with what's going on, because we did have 3 fraudulent applications. That was fascinating to me. Didn't appreciate it, but it was fascinating to know that. The good news is when you have a county of 34,000 people and you're heavily involved with the business community and the elected and appointed officials, you pretty much know what the businesses are and who's there, and some of the people. So doing some of that due diligence and making sure that what you're receiving is accurate and legitimate is important. As we all know, there were several 100,000, I think, fraudulent applications throughout the state and federal programs, right post-pandemic there. Out of the 17 applications, though, not funded, 8 had received grant funding that excluded them from having a decrease in gross revenues of $2,500 or more, which was one of the requirements. And 6 applicants did not meet the program eligibility guidelines, which were pretty loose intentionally, but they just weren't an officially registered business or had not filed the correct way. Breakdown by industry of where those grants went. Bar, restaurant, food service, there were still several, surprisingly enough. And part of our process, though, was identifying that there were still a lot of these businesses out there that had not applied for or received funding for one reason or another. And I think this is important to be able to take the county dollars and how can we help businesses countywide, right? We wanted to be able to help municipalities too. And this is our way of, you look at some of these and maybe it was one grant here or there, but like I was saying, some of these places, a lot of these places only have 1, 2, 3 businesses. So being able to help the business that was in these locations that hadn't applied for funding was really important to the county and county board. And Canton, you see 32 there, is the most populous community in Fulton County with about 12 to 13,000 people in it. And then my favorite slide, or one that I think Laura and the rest of the Fulton County Board should be very, very proud of. Although we never will truly know who might have closed their doors, hadn't it not been for this program, I can assure you from working with these folks personally, some of them would have. Some of them would have had to close their doors and they wouldn't have been able to bridge that gap, even as things were starting to get a little better there at the beginning of 2022. So the program keys over here, these are the other programs I was mentioning earlier as far as the Downstate Small Business Stabilization, Business Interruption Grant. The one that's not included in here is Payroll Protection Program. We found almost everybody had received it. Believe it or not, there were also a couple businesses in Fulton County that had not applied for or received Payroll Protection Program when they were definitely eligible. But here on the bottom right of the chart here is the Fulton County Small Business Grant Program, where we were able to do $757,500 in funding to those 63 small businesses throughout the county. Those grants ranged from $2,500 to $50,000. It was based off a formula of their decrease in gross revenues. If they had received other programs, we had built that in there. And that's, let me make sure you can see this when I pull it up here, or be able to see the PDF, Laura, or anyone? Okay. So just some of the facts on the program, wanted to be able to share this. And I also want to say, originally I had gone to the county board and recommended about $700,000. That was with some real boots on the ground, identifying who we knew a lot of these businesses were and had talked to before even recommending this. When this came down, there were only another 7 applications that were eligible that were not going to receive funding because it had been exhausted. So I'd actually gone back to the county board and asked that they consider funding those last 7 applications. So we would fund everybody that was eligible and had applied and had not received other assistance. And they did increase that amount from 700 to 757,500 to ensure those other businesses were also considered and taken care of as part of the grant program. I think the most important part is we wanted to introduce this program and get it turned around pretty immediately. So we launched the program and had grant funds out, and I was giving this report to the county board in roughly a 60 to 70 day turnaround. So we wanted applications in, reviewed, done, and money out to these businesses because it was an emergent situation, not because we just wanted to do it quickly. We knew we needed to, and then we think there were definitely some positive impacts from that. So I'm happy to share this with anyone. I won't go through all the eligibility guidelines or anything else with you this afternoon, but kind of just scrolling through here, there are definitely a lot of documents I'm happy to share. And if you are interested in doing a program like this, like I said, it would be a little more different than a COVID-19 relief grant, but it might be a support of entrepreneurs, a support of small business owners, and trying to attract some of those investments in our downtown corridors and the downtown revitalization efforts that are occurring. So it may change a little bit if you're still considering things like this, but I'm happy to answer any questions as well and share any of these documents as well. And Laura, if you'd like to add anything, feel free as well.
No, that's great, Cole. Thank you. Covered it well. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, normally these webinars are 60 minutes, but we allowed 90 minutes for today since we had 4 panelists and we had a lot of information to share. So just want to let folks know, we know that some of you may have to drop off at 1 if your lunch hour is over, but keep in mind, we do plan on staying here beyond 1 to continue on this conversation. And if you have questions for the panelists as we go along, please enter those in the chat and I'll come back to those after we hear a little more about Chad and Mike's program. So feel free to do that. Chad, you're up next.
Thank you, Laura. I think, coming about this from a different perspective, but I think one of the things that we learned is, as the ARPA funds came available, was that there was not a great awareness across McLean County as to where the struggles were in some of the rural areas. I mentioned earlier, the McLean County Board initially thought that broadband was going to be what we were going to be asking for dollars for. But when we sat down and talked with them, they learned quickly that it was really in our water infrastructure. And that kind of is where the basics start, right? If you don't have water in the coffee pot in the morning, no one wants to live in your community. So and that's where a lot of us were saying, we're gonna have to have funding. And a lot of us had plans in place for the last 10, almost 15 years, but the funding just wasn't available there. And there was really no way to get it. In my community, like I said, with 300 people, that's about 125 water accounts for $360,000. That just wasn't doable. We looked at grants. We had looked at, and a lot of that was matching, and it's like even matching was going to be difficult for a lot of our communities. Some of our communities actually need new wells. They were drying up, or they have arsenic in the western side of the county. And some of those treatment plants are $4 and $5 million to be able to treat that water and get it to where it's drinkable and usable. So sharing that with the McLean County Board was a big win for us. They are much more aware of the needs in the rural communities now. And we also created some great relationships which just weren't there prior to that. And so that has opened up doors for other conversations about intergovernmental agreements and sharing of resources and equipment and some of that stuff that is really beneficial, because we just don't have those funds as well to back trucks and things like that equipment that we can't afford on our own. I will say that in our case, as soon as the ARPA dollars, we heard they were coming, Arrowsmith went ahead and started putting our plan together, and we got with our engineering firms and went ahead and were shovel ready. So when the McLean County Board, and they moved very quickly on this, when they made the funds available to us, we were able to get our project bid out right away, and we're actually done. We completed, the last invoice was paid on October 1st of last year. So our tower was stripped totally down, recoated, repainted, and we were done by October 1st. Many of the communities are doing their projects this year, but it was also critical because, as we've already seen this year, some of that pricing has already gone up since last year. Some of those quotes have gone up for some of the projects that the communities were looking at. But like I said, overall, I think the largest
You end
benefit
up
we've
going
seen
to
is
Costco, you let me know.
But some of the, like I said, the best
I know.
benefit I think we've seen is that increased, relationship building with our county board and the awareness of what's going on out in the rural communities. Because what they didn't understand also is that McLean County, just like a lot of your counties, we have a lot of agriculture. And the communities, we provide the water for those agricultural businesses. We provide the water for rural fire departments. We provide water for a lot of things out in the county that they just really hadn't even thought about. Outside of Wilmington Normal, which is the largest population center here, there's a lot of farm ground out here, and there's a lot of people spread all over the place. And so without the rural communities and good solid water supplies, a lot of that wasn't gonna work real well across the county. So that was another thing we made them aware of, and they admitted that, yeah, that's something they just hadn't thought about. So a lot of benefits as these ARPA dollars have been distributed throughout the county.
Thanks, Chad. Mike, would you like to talk more about the program?
Sure, I probably jumped the gun a little bit there early, but there's some other programs that we've put in place. I think we know how hard the restaurant and hospitality industries were hit due to lockdowns and the sort. We were able to waive all of our liquor license fees for our restaurants and other establishments and use ARPA funding for revenue replacement in that area. Also, we were very well aware that there was a very large increase in substance abuse in our community, and unfortunately also domestic and child abuse with people, I guess, being locked up at home together sometimes. So we were able to invest a great deal of money into substance abuse, detox establishment in the county, as well as to invest, I think it was about $250,000 with the Child Advocacy Center with our courts. So I think that was really important for us to get those dollars out there and help those who are really struggling in our community. Another area, public safety, and our former sheriff who just retired had a vision for many, many years to have a regional public safety training center in the county. We were able to use about $4.5 million, which it's under construction currently. $4.5 million to construct that facility. We have had a very large initiative to work with our community and municipal partners. So this training center is going to be open on kind of a subscription type basis for our municipalities, as well as our sheriff's department, where all of the agencies can train together, and we feel that that's going to be a great benefit because they do run into each other out in the field quite a bit. And if they have confidence that their municipal partners are trained in the same way that they are, that they can be more effective in those respects. This will also help us with compliance with some of the unfunded mandates from the Safety Act, and also it's going to house our police social worker program that we've recently put in place, which is very similar to what the training center is, as far as all municipalities will have access to 7 social workers countywide. We believe that will create great efficiencies long-term, where we can share social workers and on a 24/7 basis, and individual municipalities wouldn't have to hire their own. It would all be run through the county. So that's just a couple of ways that we like to collaborate here. So and the costs will be difficult to measure in efficiencies, because everybody knows that as far as sending officers downstate for training, you have travel time, mileage, lodging, meals, and our sheriff's department, we have 120 deputies in our sheriff's department. So just for the county alone, that'll translate to millions of dollars worth of savings. And when you bring in the municipal partners at the same time, we're looking at tens of millions of dollars over the coming years in savings for all of our departments, and that's really going to help us with a lot of different areas.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, I'm going to start with a question we received. I received a direct chat. Do any of you have concern over a proposed federal clawback of ARPA funds?
Laura, I'll start with that. I was up late last night still reviewing the tentative deal, right, to see if ARPA funds are going to be clawed back, and I couldn't find anything. Yes, earlier days before this, it was a part of the discussions, but according to my limited research, I could not find it. Am I concerned about it? Yes, especially for broadband. But at the end of the day, I think that our elected officials in Washington understand how important this is to get broadband out to everyone.
According to ISACO today, that there's no provisions in this set ceiling deal to claw back funds.
Yay.
Did you, I'm sorry, Mike, did you say there are provisions to claw back?
There are not.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I couldn't find any. Thank you for that.
I'm doing a little dance. You just can't see it. I've been very concerned about that. And what do they mean by allocated and appropriated? And, if they've said we're going to spend it one way, but actually haven't, what does that mean? So
Well,
I like
Laura,
to hear that.
Yeah, Laura, I was researching the idea of a resolution passed by the board, right, committing these funds.
Yep.
Yeah, well, in
I was worried to
anticipation
answer the question, and then go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
I was going to say, in anticipation that there may be clawbacks, we had already started looking at some of the programs that we funded that may be underperforming, and look at making sure that we would get those allocated by the end of 2024, so that we don't give any funds back. We don't have any plans to. We're going to spend it all wisely and thoughtfully.
Cole, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, to answer the question, yes, I was worried, and then Mike just made my afternoon by reinforcing what I thought didn't see. But yeah, we wouldn't have had a problem spending them either, right, Laura? We would have found a way to put them to good use. So
Yeah, I worry more about that third that we set aside for a building that hasn't started construction yet, like things like that. You just don't know what definitions were going to be.
And how much is set aside that's not spent that they could claw back was the big concern, right? We've gone through a lot of planning and a lot of processes to put these things in place, like what we've seen what Brian's put together and his team. That's very valuable work, and some of that could be mitigated if that did occur.
Yeah. Anything else on that question, or I'll move on to the next one? Okay. Is every project eligible for ARPA funds? If not, then how do you determine whether a project is within the permissible scope of ARPA fund limitation? And I think Brian put a link there, but does anybody have any comment on that?
We intentionally hired a third party to score all of the applications, and the criteria was that they had to meet all of the ARPA requirements. The company that we have been working with worked with a lot of CARES funding for counties around us prior, so we were confident they were up to the task, and I believe they were. And once again, we had a scoring system in place to make sure that we would pick the highest scoring projects in a fair way, and really to take the politics out of it as well. By using a third party, I think that we accomplished that task.
And Laura, for Jackson County, as I mentioned earlier, Jackson County, one of the first things they did out of the gate, they hired a professional grant writer / resource coordinator, right? And his name's Anthony Henson, a professional grant writer, administrator. And so, he's been charged with from day one, keeping track of the ARPA funds, right? And all the reporting that goes with this, and make sure that, all T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and that we are in full compliance with all those regulations.
Great.
McLean County, I know, set up within their county administrator's office someone who we submitted all of our paperwork to, so they did all the administration work for us, and all the filing and the reporting to make sure that everything was within the guidelines for the ARPA funding.
And I think some may be aware of this, but I think early on it seemed like there was going to be could it be really strict about how to spend them, and then it seems like they loosened up some of the eligibility as we went through the process, which helped. So
I think that's a good point, Laura, too, about the reason our grant program was presented so early on, because there was also the concern of, if this does just become general fund money, so to speak, it may disappear. We may not have an opportunity to do this program. And, I think the county board would have supported just the way they did, but you never know. It's easy to allocate it for something else when it's tangible versus something that's an unknown.
Okay, again, those joining us, please enter any questions you have in the chat and we'll get to those, but I'm going to go through a few more. I'm going to throw a question out there. Some of you have covered some of this and what you've said already, so everyone doesn't have to respond if you don't have anything to add, but if you do, please jump in. What do you think are the top 2 or 3 benefits to your county because of the specific program we discussed today? Or programs?
Laura, I'll be happy to start with broadband. For us, again, we see broadband investment as an infrastructure investment. We see it, a 100-year investment. We see it helping to retain jobs in the county. We see it helping to grow jobs in the county. We see it helping to attract residents to the county. You working with the School of Medicine, you understand telehealth, right? And how it opens those pathways to better health, especially for rural residents. It certainly opens educational opportunities, right? We'll be able to take classes, being able to work from home, being able to bank from home. I mean, again, the opportunities are endless. As my little slide said, 1 million doors open with a click of a mouse. And so for us, we feel like this investment, again, we're trying to leverage 5 million into 80 million, but it will have a lasting impact.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks times 2. Anyone else want to jump in on that question? You don't have to, but if you have anything to add.
As far as McHenry County goes, I think it's helping our manufacturers find skilled young adults to work in their facilities long term. Part of our strategic plan is to keep our young people within the county. A lot of 60% of our residents actually travel outside of the county for work. And I think that if we can get our young people to work here, live here and play here, it's a benefit for all of us and keeping our community young and vibrant. As far as jobs, I think it's a win-win for everyone. Public safety, I think there's no question that long-term we're going to have some great benefits in public safety and treating those with substance abuse and affordable housing for our elderly population. These are all issues that are important to us even before the pandemic, but now we're fortunate enough to have some funding to put some real programs in action that are going to be of great benefit to us all.
Thanks, Mike.
I think of McLean County, Laura, what it does, it helps the rural communities, and we say kind of keep our costs lower, right? I mean, we compete with Bloomington Normal for people moving out to the small communities. And some of these programs were so large that we would have had to increase taxes, or we would have had to, increase rates and things like that. And this influx of funds was help these communities keep those costs lower. And these are also 50-year projects. I mean, for us, this extended the life of our water tower by 50 years is what our engineer told us. For a car locking inside of the county, their water was drying up. They needed an additional well. So I mean, there's a good 50 years of return on investment. So these were long-term investments in the rural communities that helps us compete for people moving out to those small communities.
Thanks, Chad. Anything else before I move on to the next question? What were some of the hurdles in developing and implementing the specific program each of you discussed?
Well, Laura, I'll start with that. And for us in Jackson County, I think the largest hurdle was trying to prioritize. As I said earlier, the county board had a Herculean task in front of them, with roughly $11 million and $40 million in need, right? And they had to work their way through that and try to be as fair as they possibly could. And they also towns/cities in Jackson County in the use of their ARPA funds, right? And they didn't want to duplicate how that money was spent, and they wanted to partner with them, and they did so. And so for me, at the end of the day, by spending it on broadband, they felt like, it makes the greatest impact. And for us in Jackson County, just a number to throw out there, we have over 8,000 residencies, locations, houses, if you will, that are unserved and underserved. So, we have a large number that we're trying to get to.
Jump in.
Yeah, I'd say definitely one of the hurdles, especially in our smaller counties, smaller communities, is really capacity. It's sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? If we don't have the experience or expertise to recommend a program or come up with some of these other things, it takes a significantly longer planning effort than having somebody that can kind of be that conduit between the public and private sector and the other municipalities. And I think, what you're hearing here and is exciting to see is you've got a lot of larger counties that are really invested in what's going on in their rural areas. I think that's extremely important. And I think that's extremely valuable too. Where we are, our whole county is rural and it is very large too. It's capacity. It's in many of our rural communities, it's hard enough to pay a police officer, a public works person what they deserve to be paid, or to hire that other person, let alone justify what it can take to get that experience and expertise sometimes. So that's a continual battle, and I think it will be as we go forward. Being able to have that capacity internally in our rural communities is so important, and it's exciting to see that there's a lot of that going on.
Mike, jump in. Yeah.
For us, while we had $30 million available for our community projects, we had $60 million of requests for funding. So really, I'll agree with Brian that prioritizing the projects and making sure that they're quality projects. We also tasked our consultant with making sure and checking every applicant whether there was alternative funds available to them, so that they wouldn't have to use our ARPA funds, so we could get the most into the community, and that they would still possibly be able to fund their projects, but not necessarily through our ARPA funds. I think that was probably our biggest hurdle, and compliance, because we didn't want to have anybody come back down the road and say they didn't comply and call anything back on us.
Any other comments before we move on? All right. Let's see. I think we've covered already some of the ones that we planned on talking about. What do you see as, what does overall success look like? What do you, some projects are at different stages. So some people can say this is what success looked like or has looked like, and others are still getting there. But like, just generally, what do you see as success looking like for the program we discussed?
Sure, Laura, I'll be happy to start. For us with broadband, I think success looks like a formal partnership agreement in place. It looks like, getting our first grant award in that partnership and beginning, to trench fiber will be a real success for us.
Great.
I think success for our grant program is much easier to measure today than it was maybe when we were introducing it. But I'm happy to report that the businesses that are listed, those 63 businesses we did support are still open. Their doors are still open, and they're still generating tax base. And a lot of it, from the success standpoint, how do we measure that? Is these are places that if you want to combine that, if all 63 of those close, which they all wouldn't have, but if they do, that there's property tax, there's vacancy issues, there's all the other sales tax things that come along with it. And success for us was keeping the doors open on those businesses. And I think long-term being able to continue supporting them and seeing them do well and generate long-term value for the county and themselves is our success marker with the program.
Thanks, Cole.
And success for us is having 120 kids go through an internship program instead of 100 for multiple years. I mean, we're going to have hundreds of kids going through these programs in just a few short years. And when your industries are crying out for help, that they need labor, and we're able to provide that for them, and the kids are able to get good paying jobs, that's success. Substance abuse, if we can help just one person overcome an addiction problem, I think that's success.
Success for us, Laura, is just getting these projects completed, struggling with some of the resource issues, and getting these dollars spent before the timeline runs out, right? Right now, I know some of the communities are struggling with getting contractors and getting, right, even some of the materials we're still struggling with some of that. So that's, if they can get all that done, and Arrowsmith, we got ours done early, like I stated. I know some of our communities are trying to figure out how to get those funds spent, get those projects wrapped up before the timeline ends.
Thanks, Chad. So for those of you that used a consultant, how did you find the consultant? What kind of process did you use to evaluate their performance? Like, talk a little bit more about what that looked like.
Brian, do you use one? You use one, you said, right? For McHenry County, I mean, we were familiar from when the CARES funding went out for the other counties and the groups that they had used to assist them. We did put out an RFQ for other consultants, and decided on one that was local to us. I think that was very important that they were local. If we needed them to come into the office for meetings, that they would be able to do so. So that was probably a big criteria for hiring them, and the success that they had in the past of CARES funding programs that they facilitated.
Kind of a interesting position for me. I guess I kind of was the consultant through the lens of the partnerships. So the Spoon River Partnership for Economic Development is its own 501c3 organization funded by the county and the city and private businesses. So we actually took that role on and administered the program and our portion of it for the county. We wrote the program, accepted applications, reviewed them, scored them, got them back to the county board for approval and final reviews. Worked with the county treasurer. So it's pretty hands-on, but I think that's why we were able to be successful too. Just like Mike mentioned, having them local, being able to be present is so important. Being able to understand what your barriers are so that you can address those barriers is so important, and you can't do that if you're not present. So I think if it wasn't us, and I know the county had employed some other consultants too, just for the review process, but having that boots on the ground work is extremely important.
Laura, for Jackson County, I think, it was myself and the Connect Jackson County team going through that 14-week training program through the Illinois Office of Broadband that we became the consultants to help advise the Jackson County Board in this whole strategic plan of building out the county.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add from a Fulton County perspective to Cole, pull something that Mike said earlier and what Cole was doing. One thing that was brought up, I think I may have been the one to do so, when we decided on the criteria and we had the Spoon River Partnership and Cole kind of take the lead on all of that, we made it very clear that the county board shouldn't be coming in and looking at the recommendations from Cole and his team saying, well, I don't know, Brian's got a fancy car, so maybe he doesn't need this, or we didn't want it to get to a point where individual board members were trying to interject and hopefully they wouldn't have, but we wanted to make sure that we approved the program, we approved the restrictions and the guidelines and all of that, but then we let Cole run with it. And if he said things scored correctly or people were eligible, then we were going to go with that and not then the county shouldn't step in at that point and try to make changes. So I think that was important for us to sort of recognize that early on, that wasn't what would be an expectation of the program. Sometimes small town politics or small county politics can, just got to make sure you're thinking ahead on some of that.
I think it's an important point, Laura. The separation, the working together, but the separation from the dynamics of the program itself were pretty important. And I don't know how fun it would have been for you guys to review all 63 applications one by one. We might have never got through it.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to give a shout out to our county administrator, Pete Austin, and our amazing staff at McHenry County for really seeing the vision of the county and implementing that. I think they've done a fantastic job. And, and I think with having the consultant, there was very few of the projects that had any changes made to them whatsoever. There may have been a couple of reductions in what the ask was, but it was mostly so that we could fund other projects more fully as well.
Any hurdles that anyone ran into that we haven't already discussed? Anything that stands out or something you wish would have done differently? I know we've covered, again, some folks have covered some of these, but if there's anything else you want to add, just throwing that out there.
I probably would ask for more dollars for entrepreneurs had we been post standard allocation or standard revenue loss and it becoming a little more freed up. I should point out that as part of the reason our program is written so specifically towards that is because we thought we were going to have a lot deeper reporting requirements at the time that this was being proposed as well. So,
Laura, I think for us in Jackson County, our largest hurdle will be that formal legal agreement. And, a public-private partnership. It's something that not all counties are familiar with, right? Certainly not in the broadband arena. And so, we're working with the Illinois Office of Broadband for examples that we can use for modeling. Mm-hmm. And so, once we get that under our belt, that hurdle, I think we'll be on our way.
Great.
Yeah, as far as McHenry County goes, I say some of the hurdles, it's some really good requests and applications just didn't qualify. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of disappointing at times. What we would do differently, I think it's a little bit too soon to tell. We do know that there's a very small percentage of a couple programs that are underfunding, but I wouldn't say that that's a disappointment. It's just they're having an effect, but they just haven't been able to utilize the funds. But there's still time. 2026, right? Something like that.
McLean County, the McLean County Board and McLean County has done a great job in helping us with those hurdles. They realize that the small communities we don't have the staff, and we just don't have that expertise to deal with all the reporting and everything that goes along with it. We're going to be struggling with the reporting just for our small dollars that we're dealing with for ARPA that we each received. So a big shout out to McLean County for that, for taking that burden off of us for the short-term and long-term reporting. They just rolled that in underneath their reporting, so they're going to take care of that. But the reporting is still, a hurdle that has to be overcome.
Big shout out, Chad, for them for giving you more than what you asked for too.
Yeah,
usually
definitely.
we're going backwards, not.
Yeah, so and because they did that, that allowed some other communities who didn't get in on the front end of that to come in and request some dollars as well. So like I said, I think we started with 8, we ended up with 11 communities that got funding, or will receive funding through this program.
Great. Well, we don't have any more questions unless I missed some from our audience. We've exhausted the questions that I had prepared. I think, and we're losing some folks, I think, because a lot of people joined during their lunch hour. So any final remarks, closing remarks from anyone, anything that you wish you would have touched on, or anything?
Laura, one last shout out for all the counties and municipalities that are still on. Please go to the Illinois Office of Broadband. Look up your county, look up your town, take a, and understand how much money is out there that's coming your way, and how to make application for it, to reach out to the Illinois Office of Broadband. They'll help you with those applications, but please don't let this money pass you by, because it could be, decades before we see it again.
And hopefully we see it for a different reason and not for a pandemic.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Just shout out to, Laura, the Fulton County Board, everybody that's been involved with this whole process. It's been, everybody that's on here, knowing we have good leaders across the state and downstate too is so important. It always reassures me. So thanks to Brian and Chad and Mike too, and for leading these charges. It's an important part of it. And if we're not talking about it and sharing that information and getting others to think about it and think about what that vision looks like, get out of this 2-year and 4-year, 5-year mind frame of decision making, and let's think about what the next 30 years really looks like. And I think these are important conversations for that and these long-term investments. So just thanks for having us on today, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cole.
Well, I'm thankful for the opportunity to join you today. It's great to see how the other counties and communities are working together to put these funds to the best use. And that's what we try to focus on as a county. And it's great to see it going on in other areas of the state as well. That's not always the case where municipalities and counties are working together. So I think it's a great thing and a benefit to us all. So thank you. Thank you for what you guys are doing.
I can echo that as well, Laura, and everybody put this together. It is great to hear from other counties how the funds have been used and how you work together with your county boards and in your rural communities as well. Quick shout out to Lexington Mayor. He's the head of the Mayor Association in McLean County. He spearheaded a lot of this as well as the McLean County Board for so quickly providing these funds to the rural communities. I said in one case, these truly were in our small communities life-saving. We needed those funds to keep moving forward. We just weren't going to have the dollars for some of this stuff. And if your water system goes or you can't deal with your drainage, then people don't want to live in your community. So they truly were life-saving funds for us.
Great. I want to thank all of you again for joining us. Thanks for giving us the time and for all the emails and phone calls we've had over the last 6 or 8 weeks in planning this. Really appreciate you all being here and sharing information. Getting great feedback in the chat box from folks. There was a request for the broadband link that you mentioned, Brian. So I don't know if you can throw that in the chat, or we can send it to Nancy and she can send it out with the follow-up email. I can't hear you, Brian.
Yeah, here we go. Nancy's very familiar with this link, but I'll look for it now. Yeah.
Perfect. And then Ann Silvas, before we got started, mentioned the extension is doing a survey of strategic planning survey that they're asking partners to fill out. So she put a link in the box there. Our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, June 13th, and it is part 2 of our downtown restoration webinar series. Again, this is partnership between Rural Partners and University of Illinois Extension. We appreciate Extension hosting us and working with us on this project. I didn't mention this earlier, but Rural Partners is the state's Rural Development Council. We have a volunteer board. We have membership dues if you'd like to be part of it at different levels. I'll put a link. I did put a link to our website in the chat, but if you have any questions, please reach out. Cole and I both serve on the board, and we'd love to have you involved. So any other housekeeping items, anything before we wrap up? Nancy or Ann, anything I missed? Brian, thanks for putting the link in the chat.
You're welcome.
Thanks for serving as moderator, Laura. It was great to have you kind of marshaling all those, all the questions and all the answers. That was great.
Great. I enjoyed it. I appreciate all of your time, and all of our participants. Thanks for being here. And if you think there's other folks that would enjoy this, know that Nancy will be posting the recording in the near future. Thank you all.